The definition of this word has changed over the last 100 years. At the time, children started to become paralyzed. This was not something that they had ever seen in mass like that. Rutland, Vermont, 1894, is listed as the first epidemic of polio. You can look through that history and it sort of seems to hold up. Yes, there were children that got paralyzed and there were some deaths, but it doesn't take much reading to start to see some other odd factors play into it, such as there were animals that were getting paralyzed. There were animals that were dying. Animals becoming paralyzed is not something polio can do. And in fact, polio can only paralyze a very specific animal, which is old world monkeys. We know this now, they didn't know it at the time. Start going backwards in time. I go back 1 year, 1893, Boston has its biggest outbreak of polio. So then you go back to 1892, and I started finding out a story about an invasive species of moth called the gypsy moth that had been brought into New England, had been destroying everything in its path, and they were powerless to stop it. So 1892 was the year they finally figured out a new pesticide called lead arsenate. And they were able to combine these two ingredients together, lead and arsenic, in such a way that it created a great pesticide and it couldn't easily be washed off. It was like a miracle pesticide. It was used everywhere. It was absolute war to save the great hardwoods of New England before the gypsy moth destroyed everything. 1893, Boston, the place where the pesticide was invented, 26 cases of polio. Never seen it before. Why did this happen? 1894, a year later, Rutland, Vermont records the first case of epidemic polio, 126 people. Horses, chickens. There are many viruses and bacteria in the world that can paralyze. The question is, why were animals being paralyzed? Why were children having seizures and convulsions? This is not a hallmark sign of a polio infection. This is a hallmark sign of pesticide exposure. Why did children start becoming paralyzed? The very year, the very location, the very quadrant of the country where this new pesticide was invented.
This lead arsenate was super sticky. It was on the fruit that people ate, kids ate.
I can't express to you enough how liberally this pesticide was sprayed. There was zero concern at the time for toxicity. They had things called cattle dips, which were essentially man-made ditches where the cattle would literally run through these troughs to coat them in this stuff. And it couldn't be washed off. That's sort of a key component.
And that would eventually go through the cow's milk and into people as well. Did the people that were applying this, the farmers, did they stick with a prescriptive formula?
There was no regulation on this. They would go there and pick up a bottle of lead. They'd pick up a bottle of arsenic. They'd combine it based on what they heard at the local farmer's market. It was the wild, wild west.
So as this story progresses, we're spraying it more and more and more at higher and higher concentrations to kill these moths.
You can trace the spread of polio alongside the spread of the gypsy moth as it expanded from Boston into New England.